Hello and welcome to another video on the best games of a letter arcade edition, and this is for the letter G. Yes, in this series I imagine what if I could only choose 5 games per letter per system, discard all the others. What would I choose? So here I'm not coming from the point of view of what games are most important to gaming history, or even which games are most beloved. But instead, for me, it's the games I personally enjoy to play the most. Now my choices here in this series may surprise you, but this video series is really just a bit of fun to help give people suggestions on what games to try the next time you're looking through that fully loaded retro gaming list, deciding what to play. Okay, as I mentioned, this is for the arcades and the letter G. So without further ado, let us begin. Right, for the number 5 choice, I've decided to go for the lesser known 1992 Toplin shooter Grindstormer, or V5 as it was known in Japan. Although I would say that actually the Japanese and the Western version of this have slightly different power-up methods in the game. Now this was Akira Tsunemoto's first game for Toplin, and of course he went on to found Cave and do a fantastic array of games. Now you can really see, though, even starting out his career, you can see what a genius he was. Now I love this game. It's fast, it's frantic, and it really shows a true mastery of Toplin as a company, with its team achieving again absolute wonderment with this title. Now it is a tough title to play, with it being a real challenge with a wall of bullets and relatively limited power-ups. Having said that, the game never feels cheap or broken. It always has a way through the attack waves in the game, so you always know you can learn it and get better at the game. Now this game did see a great port on the Mega Drive, and it's well worth tracking that down, because not only is it a solid version of the arcade original, it does allow you to play both Grindstormer or the VV versions, the V5 versions of the game in the same cart, which is a wonderful touch. Now I will say the game in the Mega Drive version does suffer from some slowdown, which of course you don't get on the arcade original, but outside of MAME it's really the only way to play it. But as you can see, MAME does a great job of emulating this game, so until Toplin come out with a collection with it on, this is your only way to play this classic title as it was meant to be played. Okay, let's go on to my 4th choice, and I've gone for Ghosts and Goblins, released in 1985 by Capcom. Now this probably needs no introduction. It has you play Sir Arthur the Knight, who sees his sweetheart Princess Guinevere kidnapped by the Goblin King. Now Arthur must have what is the worst suit of armour ever devised, because any hit, even from a bird for crumb's sake, causes it to crumble away, leaving our hapless hero running around in his underwear diaper, haplessly trying to make his way through an insanely difficult level, exposed to the elements. Now, as you probably can tell, this is a tough game, and as much as I try to play the damn game and improve upon it, it really does need godlike arcading skills to progress even a few levels in. Now, known in Japan as Makemura, which translates to Demon World Village, and of course made by the Capcom gaming gods such as Tokuro Fujiwara, who of course went on to do Street Fighter and did games like Commando. Now, this game of course saw pretty good ports everywhere across the board on home computers and consoles, and later on, thankfully, in the Xbox and PS2 era, there was the Capcom Classic Collection that got released, which gave you arcade perfect version, and later the Capcom Arcade Cabinet Collection on the Xbox 360 and PS3 era gave the game again. But thankfully MAME does a brilliant version of emulating this, and it's another game of course that's in the Arcade Club in the Bury of the UK, so go play this game if you get a chance, alongside its equally famous and equally tough sequel. Okay, let's go on to my 3rd choice, and I've gone for Garou, Mark of the Wolf by SNK and released in 1999. Now this is the 9th game in the Fatal Fury game series, and I think this is the pinnacle of this game line. As you can see here, the game is jaw-droppingly beautiful, with 12 distinct characters, all hand-drawn and stunningly animated. Now along with the sumptuous game visuals, there's a lot of gameplay enhancements to the game worthy of note, such as rewarding you for defending or rebuilding your health on the TOP modes to claw yourself back from near defeat. Now, I've got to be honest, for nuances like this, pass me by personally. I'm a button basher to the end when it comes to fighters, but I still enjoy them, and it's nice to know that there's such subtleties out there for people skilled enough to use them. Now, back in the day, this came out on the Neo Geo arcade cabinet as a very pricey cart, and it's extremely pricey to buy it again today. But it's also found its way, thankfully, onto the Dreamcast and PS2 with great home ports, particularly on the Dreamcast. And of course, thankfully, this game has made it onto many SNK Neo Geo collections across the year, but particularly most recently the 25th anniversary Neo Geo Arcade Classic Complete Collection, which is well worth picking up, by the way, because it is a stunning library of games. But alternatively, as you can see, MAME emulates it brilliantly these days, so that there's many ways to enjoy this classic fighter again today. Okay, for my number 2 choice, I've gone for the brilliant Galaga 88, released in 1987 by Namco. Now, this is the 4th game in the series, and it's an amazing update, taking all that was fun and unique about the original Galaga and its sequels like Galpus, and combining it all with updated, cute visuals and sounds, with a huge variety, 29 stages and 7 bosses, taking each sector throwing something unique to the mix. And it also doesn't take itself too seriously, mixing in standard levels with galactic dancing bonuses and some great bosses that you encounter. It's hearing that satisfying pop of the enemies as they burst into small fireworks, along with the great array of satisfactory arcade sounds that just wins me over, and I just never tire of playing this game again and again. I just can't get enough. Now, back in the day, the only way to play this outside of the arcade was on the fantastic port on the PC Engine. Thankfully, this port is pretty much arcade perfect and well worth tracking down and getting, despite its quite high price today. The Game Gear also saw a port released in 1991, confusingly called Galaga 2, but to be honest, it struggles in my opinion with the small screen. Now, thankfully, the arcade original game did make it to some of the Namco compilations, with crazily being a hidden unlockable on the Namco Museum 50th Anniversary Edition that was released on the Xbox, GameCube and PS2. I find it crazy they had it hidden away, such a classic game, but it is on there if you play through some of the other games. It also appeared on the Namco Museum Virtual Arcade on the Xbox 360 and PS3 era, so that's another way to play it today. Now, of course, as you can see, this emulates brilliantly on MAME, and it's another one, thankfully, in the Arcade Club in Bury, so it's well worth giving that a beeline to as well. Okay, so that leaves me with my number 1 game, and of course it had to be Golden Axe by Sega, released in 1989. Now, this has you play a choice of 3 heroes who are on a quest to rescue the kidnapped king and queen from the evil villain Death Adder. These heroes is a barbarian called Axe Battler, an Amazonian warrior named Tyrus Flare, and a dwarf called Gilius Thunderhead. So your heroes set out across 5 levels, smashing up all the evil orcs and beasties, rescuing the villagers and making your way finally to take on Death Adder himself. Now, what's special about this game is how well thought out it all is. There's always a suitable number of moves, so it always feels varied enough and interesting as you play through. Along the way, there's rideable monsters, which really adds a fun dimension to the game, especially when compared to other scrolling beat-em-ups. Now, alongside the standard attacks, there's also a magic button, which when you have enough blue canisters, it allows you to release and destroy everyone on the screen, or do at least some serious damage to some of the larger boss creatures. These bonus canisters are picked up in small bonus stages throughout the game. This is when you're camping out and sleeping, and some naughty goblins come and steal your canisters, so you have a small amount of time to attack them and get those canisters back, in addition to some extra ones as well. It's a nice break from the normal game, and it really gives that feeling that this is not just a fun afternoon jaunt, but instead an epic quest with you travelling over many days to make it to save the king and queen. Now, the game was made by Makoto Uchida and Team Shinobi Division, and you can really see how they've taken all that they've learned from games like Altered Beasts and games like that and culminated it all together into this. As you can see, alongside the great gameplay, it's a gorgeous game, being iconic today as it was on its release. It has amazing music, really capturing that epic fantasy vision of it all. Now, Now, I remember when this first came out, and at the time there was nothing that could touch it. And later on, other games like Capcom's Dungeons and Dragons, or even Golden Axe's own sequel, has perhaps improved upon it visually. There's just something unquantifiably classic about this original game that just keeps drawing you back, and I still think leaves all the competition crumpled to the dust. Now, this game back in the day was everywhere, with varying levels of success. Overall, I think only the Master System, the Amiga and ST, and the Mega Drive versions really captured that true arcade feeling, with the others being pretty substandard really. These days, for the arcade, it's only shown up on the Xbox 360 and PS3 as a digital download, and can be played in, as shown here, such as MAME. So there you go, there's my top 5 choices. But of course, as always, I've shamefully left a lot of huge big hitters off my list, and many honourable mentions. So I'm going to go through them here, just so I at least give these wonderful games a mention. Okay, for the big hitters we have to begin with Galaxian, released in Namco way back in 1979. Now, it's an important game, I get it. It definitely took the whole genre forward and was the beginning of that whole running Galaga series. Today it's still fun, but it's just that slower speed, which when compared to others that followed it, such as Galaga, just something I struggle with today, with much faster iterations that came later on. So, as we mentioned, its sequel, Galaga, which was released in 1981 by Namco, does an amazing update to that original Galaxian game. This time there's much more interesting strike patterns coming towards you, and it's all running blisteringly fast. Now, talking of Galaga's sequel, there's a little-known third in the series called Galpus, or sometimes occasionally and rather confusingly also known as Galaga 3. There was no Galaga 2, by the way, so unless you include Galaga 2, which is on the Game Gear, that is actually Galaga 88. Does your head hurt yet? Mine certainly does. Okay, so this is Galpus, and what it does a great update of the original. I mean, one of the things that really stands out of this over the Galaga game is it allows you to capture enemies in a special power-up, turning them into drones that help join you in the fight. It's also, incidentally, next time you play Ridge Racer and you choose the Galpus team, you know what they're talking about. It's a reference to this title. Now, talking of big hitters, they don't go much bigger than this. It's, of course, Atari's Gauntlet, released in 1985. Hugely popular in the day. I do absolutely love it. It's fun on the 4-player. But I do find in recent years, when I've tried to play with a variety of friends, particularly even on the original arcade, it sort of lets it down. It's quite a real coin guzzler, and as you get through a lot of the levels, I find I just get lost and overwhelmed, becoming a bit frustrated really. And actually, while we talk about Gauntlet, we should mention its main arcade sequel, Gauntlet Legends. Of course, there was Gauntlet 2, which was a slight update, but Gauntlet Legends, released in 1989, is a 3D iteration of Gauntlet, and actually I think a lot of fun to play, being a nice update to the series. Now, talking of great series, there's also Ghouls and Ghosts, which was released in 1988. Now, this is much prettier looking sequel to Ghosts and Goblins, and to many, and I get the reasons why, they think it's a far superior version to the original. But for me, there's just something nostalgic I love about that first game that came out in 1985, probably from the home ports, and so that is why I plumped for the original game as opposed to this one. Now, another big hitter, of course, is Green Beret, known in the US as Rush and Attack. This was released in 1985 by Konami, and gameplay-wise, it's simplicity itself. You run left to right, stab all your enemies to progress through the level, but it's far too tough for me. If I'm honest, I just don't possess the gaming skills to get very far at all. I did quite like it on the Spectrum. It was a really solid port, but it was a lot slower and easier to play on there. Okay, then we have Gyrus. Gyrus was released in 1983 by Konami and was made by Toshiki Okamoto, whom of course went to Capcom to do little known games like 1942 and Street Fighter 2, and this really shows his early genius. It's simply amazing, offering a pseudo 3D tunnel shooter mixing in the idea of Tempest meets Galaga Galaga, and it's so addictive. Now, talking of Yoshiki Okamoto, there's another game that he did when he went to Capcom called Gunsmoke, released in 1985. Now, this is a really fun overhead western shooter, but there's not enough variety for me to keep me interested. I find it once you've gone through a couple of the levels, there's not much to keep me going. Okay, they're the big hitters for the letter G, but I want to give some lesser known honourable mentions as well. Now, first we have the sequel to Golden Axe with Golden Axe Revenge of the Death Adder. Now, this came out in 1992, and I think really it was sort of just too late. It came at the wrong time in the arcades where everybody was in love with Street Fighter 2, and it just didn't have the same impact. And it's a shame because it's a great update with lots of nice ideas, but maybe it's my nostalgia talking, but I feel it is missing something that the original game has, you know, that game's charm from the original title. Okay, another game I want to shout out is Gal Panic S Extra Edition, released in 1997 by Kaneko. Okay, I know you're looking at the video and you're seeing all these hand-drawn anime girls in raunchy poses, and like a lot of people, you'll probably dismiss it out of hand. But that's a real shame because, you know, put that to side, and there's no nudity in this. It's only sort of slight raunchy sort of outfits these anime characters are wearing, really. But the reason I love this game is because it's actually, I think, one of the best Kicks updates around. Like that original game, you're drawing shapes to colour in the background and make up the picture. It all plays so well, it's so addictive and well worth tracking down and giving this game a go, I think. Now, the letter G also had some amazing shooters to play as well. One of my favourites is Ghost Pilots, released by SNK in 1991. Now, I love the big chunky sprites of this game, and it's a really fun shooter, if not doing anything particularly special. It's solid and addictive. Then we also have the cave shooter called Gawanje. Now, this is released in 1999, so another bullet hell, but this time you're actually a character or number of characters walking along the floor, and it's all set in the Japanese Middle Ages. It's mixing in heavy fantasy elements as well. It's a great shooter, and it's nice to see all those weird Japanese folklore references, and it's a nice change really from all those spaceships that you usually have in these kind of shooters. Now, along with that great shooter, I also want to mention the Brill 1999 Capcom shooter Giga Wings. This is really worth a play. It's a solid shooter, it's fun and fast, although keep away, in my opinion, from its sequel, where they try to do it all in a 3D engine rather than the beautiful hand-drawn graphics you're seeing here, and it really pales in comparison to the beautiful original. Also, worthy of note is the game Gunbird by Psychio, which was released in 1994. Now, I love all the playable characters and that mixing of steampunk meeting fantasy, making this a real fun, solid blaster, well worth giving a try. Likewise, the 1998 sequel of Gunbird is well worth playing as well, being though still the same game, I guess, to the original, only prettier. But then when the original was so good, is that a bad thing? Finally, I want to shout out Jaleco's 1995 shooter Game Tengoku, the Game Paradise. Now, I love this game, and to be honest, it was on my list right until the last minute. I only dropped it off because the arcade original is just too darn hard. Now, thankfully, that's a fact that they rectified in the home ports on the PS4 and PC, and also originally on the Saturn, Japanese only, unfortunately. But still, what we have here is a love letter to Jaleco. Going through all of their gaming paths, you get to try different ships from their other games like Exerion, Plus Alpha and Formation Z, and you come against many of their own other game characters as enemies, such as Rodland and many of their obscure Japanese games. Now, I adore this title. There's so much variety to the levels and taking you into each video game of their Jaleco gaming past, which I think is a lovely idea, and I wish more game companies would do it. Now, as I mentioned, these days it's probably better to get the Saturn, PS4 or PC versions of the game, as these do much needed tweaking to the game's difficulty and makes this a much better game to play than the arcade original. Right, there you go. There were my top 5 for the letter G. I hope you enjoyed, and I can't wait to hear your own thoughts of what games you would choose. So look out for my next video covering the letter H. It's gonna be another belter. So until next time, keep it retro.